Let me see. Annie, do you happen to know if any baby STWingers were going to come up?
No.
I was muted.
time is a time.
One
You
person
can
was.
start.
I don't see her here, but maybe she'll join in a bit. I've also started recording.
All right.
Oh,
All right.
I need
Well,
to cut this out.
I need
okay,
to put
our
my
degeneracy done needs to
fancy
be seen.
face on. Hold
That's
on.
kind of troublesome.
Gotta look good for the
All right.
camera. All right.
Oh, he
Oh,
Where'd
pulled
you
it
get a
up.
purple Wharton hat? Dang.
Bro, it's clout.
That is clout.
That is,
The
honestly.
only-
fact that it matches your shirt is just like extra.
Yeah, the matching is nice. I like
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
I try.
That's it.
Alright, so
All right. Are we ready to get started?
Yeah,
Ye-
just commence at this moment in time.
All right.
everyone mute yourselves. Also, if it disconnects, just reconnect to the same link, remember?
Yeah.
All right, so to start off, we are going to be doing Infinite Summary, the DC Canon Explained. Now, Infinite Summary is a really stupid title, and many people ask me why I would choose such a dumb, moronic title. And it's because the word infinite, or the word crisis, or the word something to do with infinity, time, crisis, pretty much those three, always have something to do with major life-shifting events within the DC universe. So be prepared to hear the word infinite, infinity, time, and crisis a lot. You're going to be sick of them. So at the start, we have to go over a little bit of history, a little bit. And I'm not going to bore you with an entire history lesson, but in order for you to understand the canon, that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to put you guys recording my screen or seeing what I'm doing. That way you can do all this good stuff. All right. And let's go. So can everyone see that? I need one person to unmute so they can say yes.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
boy.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, thank you. Now, go back to being mute, bitches. All right, so the entire purpose of DC Comics was a post-World War I effort to revitalize newspapers and comic sequences in a way that was profitable. So instead of, just having the funny pages, which was something people seemed to enjoy, they could say, all right, let's go and let's make them into long-term things that we can sell rather than making 5 cents off of every, reading of this. So we started off with the Golden Age. Now, most of you know about people like Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who created Superman, or Bob Kane and Bill Finger, who created Batman. But a little-known person within this was Gardner Fox. Now, big comic fans hear that name a lot because he is honestly the founder of DC comic writing. The actual founder was Malcolm Nicholson, Lieutenant Major of Malcolm Nicholson, World War I. I believe he got the Medal of Honor. I may be making that up. But Gardner Fox wrote under 17 different pseudonyms and wrote over 1,500 individual issues of DC Comics. And that is only DC Comics. Overall, he probably wrote about 4,000, including his runs on Marvel and other independent subsidiaries, which never came to light. For every Marvel and DC, there were about 5 or 10 others that were out there publishing comics that, were just kind of off the wall at that time, where they got rebranded and consolidated to the mainstream universes, like All-Star Comics or Valiant Comics, things like that. So the first publication was called Fun, the Big Comic Magazine. And the first superhero, who is still in use today, is not Superman, actually, who debuted in 1938, but it was Dr. Occult, who debuted 1935, issue 6 of Fun, the Big Comic Magazine. Now, he's still around. He's kind of a minor character, definitely not as big as Superman. But everyone always wants to point it to Superman being the first superhero, and they're wrong. So anyway, you see in those things, like, if you can actually see the image, Superman's talking about a guy trying to stab him, and then Superman ended up dropping him off a building. Comics did not have the whole no-kill rule, the whole, everyone values life they do now. Batman carried a gun, and in his first issue, he hung a guy with the bat plane and carried him around until he suffocated, saying that it was suitable that he died because he was mentally slow. So his life had little value already. So just a little understanding of the dark place that comics kind of came from and how we had to reimagine and take a good look at our values so that we get to where we are today. But anyway, so you saw Action Comics in 39 and Detective Comics in 38. I'm sorry, Action Comics in 38, Detective Comics in 1939, debuting Superman and Batman respectively. Wonder Woman debuted with All-Star Comics in 1941. And besides that, a lot of other superheroes that you know, such as Hawkman and Hawkgirl, The Flash, Green Lantern, The Phantom, Zatanna, Dr. Fate, they all appeared during this time. And so those were not the ones that most people are aware of, but these two guys that you see on the, I guess that's the right-hand side. The one that's running is the Flash. The one that's flying is Green Lantern, who is ironically wearing red. So these were the first incarnations of those characters, which in the Silver Age became a bit of an issue because after 1940 something, the war was over and people kind of lost track of superheroes for a bit. They said, we don't really care about that. Real Americans won the war. So most comics turned to, war tales or westerns. Action Comics and Detective Comics still got, they were still being published because of the popularity of Superman and Batman independently. All-Star kind of took a dip, but Wonder Woman was popular enough that she kind of stayed in there. Although All-Star Comics faded out until they were repurchased back by DC later on in like the 60s. But so you saw a bunch of new characters emerge, a reimagination of the Flash, and he's on the left, the very far left is the modern day Flash lookalike, and then on the right side of that image is the Flash from the 40s. So, and then on the other side you see Green Lantern and Flash, and that doesn't look anything like the Green Lantern you saw before. So the big problem was we have all these characters, they've got the same names, they've got different adventures and different identities entirely. So how do we go and consolidate them? So what happened was what you see on the very left side, Flash of Two Worlds. It introduced the meeting of the Flash and the Flash, two characters from different Earths. Now, the all red and yellow clad Flash, the more modern interpretation that everyone knows, he is from Earth 1. The Golden Age comics, including the very first Superman that ever debuted, the Flash and the Green Lantern, Alan Scott and all that, they are taking place in Earth 2. So there is an entirely separate universe where the Golden Age happened, and it just happens a little bit prior to Earth 1. So that's why whenever you meet up with Superman from Earth 2 later on in the like the 80s, you see that he has a little bit of the Fantastic Four's Mr. Fantastic white hair going on. He's a little older. He's a little more gristly. So after the Silver Age, we get to the Bronze Age, and that's when comics really kind of took off in terms of the story writing. Up until this point, we had continuity issues. Independent authors weren't doing one title at a time. They were just jumping around from issue to issue, having independent capers where you saw things like Superman becoming ostentatiously gay, or Batman and Robin switching roles, or Jimmy Olsen gaining superpowers, things like that. And so within the Bronze Age, you saw some more darker themes come up, but you also saw more consolidated storytelling. Now, we had the JSA, Justice Society of America, back in the 40s. They sort of interpreted into the Justice League of America, JLA, and there's still a JSA within both universes, but the JLA is the more popular one. And with the birth of the JLA came the Bronze Age's birth of the big super team. So you see things like the Batman family becoming more consolidated. There's multiple Robins, there's multiple Batgirls. Well, how do we bring them all together to make sure that Batman retains his children? You saw things like Teen Titans, you saw the Outsiders. They all came in throughout the 70s and 80s, all these reimaginings of superheroes working together and being in an issue on wacky adventures. And this also lent way to the first reboot of the entire franchise, which was Crisis on Infinite Earths, the very right-hand comic there. Crisis on Infinite Earths, we'll get more into details later, but it dealt with essentially the positive matter and antimatter universes colliding. And, of course, the antimatter universe is the evil one, which is trying to destroy the matter universe so that it can expand its territory. Led to a lot of deaths, quite literally trillions, as multiple universes collapsed in on themselves. But overall, we'll get there eventually. Next comes the modern age, and that's what we know today. Most comic readers, whenever they go out, they pick up one of these, or if they're looking at, the 50-cent bin, that's whenever you get more often than not things from the Bronze Age. Things from the Silver Age are pretty, they're moderately expensive. Things from the Golden Age, those are collector's editions. You pay hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands for them. So Modern Age, at this point, you had like things going on at post-crisis, which is what it's called, is whenever you've got Crisis on Infinite Earths happening. So post-crisis events happen here in the Modern Age. You had New 52. You had the birth of the Outsiders, and in the 90s, you had Rebirth, which happened in 2016, started debuting in 2015 a little bit in anticipation. But so this is where we are now, and this is where the biggest reinventions of canon are trying to take place so that readers can consolidate their information. As time goes by, it's not enough that we just have these little stories. We want a cohesive theme. So everyone wants to know, what's the timeline? How old is Batman really? When did Barry Allen switch over from being the Flash versus Wally West, and how does it impact his aging that he's now back after being trapped in the Speed Force for so long? Different weird things. Like if you see this Superman, he's not even the original Superman of Earth 1. He's from a completely different Earth, but he is now on Earth 1 because Earth 1 Superman died. This is the Superman that fought Doomsday way back when. It's a whole thing, and that would be a story for another time. But so, in order to understand the DC canon, we have to understand the crises. Now, before the crises, there was established canon, but it is not as integral to the storyline as many people would think. The big things that happened were the establishment of individual heroes, their backstories, and the establishment of super teams. So overall, you see less significance upon the universe happening in the Golden and Silver Age. And we'll get to how that breaks down in terms of the comic accurate timeline, in terms of not our years, but their years as they're experiencing them, and how it relates later. So Crisis on Infinite Earths, you see the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor. They are two basically intergalactic cosmic entities who are presiding over both the positive matter and negative antimatter universes. The Anti-Monitor, of course, is the evil guy, because obviously someone with the name Anti in there has to be the evil one. So he's trying to destroy the positive universe so that he can expand his territory. This leads to the bringing together of several super-powered people, including superheroes and villains, from across multiple universes, all by the Monitor. It was very fun, a lot of big battles. You got to see a lot of your favorite characters interacting with each other, and it allowed you to see some from independent subsidiaries like Valiant and Vertigo Comics. So it was cool. The big significance there was that there were multiple big deaths. You saw the Flash, Barry Allen, die. You saw Supergirl die. You saw both the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor die. You saw the first incarnation of Dove, Hawk's brother, die. And all of the Earth 3's evil Justice League, which was a very interesting run. They were the crime syndicate. They were basically, it was like, instead of, imagine the heroes of the day becoming the villains, imagine the villains of the day becoming the heroes. So the Joker was the Jester. Lex Luthor was, well, he was just called Lex Luthor. But Superman was Ultraman, Batman was Owlman, switch the roles. But they all died, and quite literally trillions, if not quadrillions of people died as almost untold amounts of universes closed in upon themselves. Only 5 universes were able to remain, and all of those worlds folded in to become one singular universe. So that after 1985, well, 1986 when the series ended. So after 86 is whenever you see one singular Earth and its timeline is concrete. That is what Crisis on Infinite Earths was supposed to do, at least. However, if there's anything that humans are incapable of, it's leaving a good thing alone. So yeah, we ended up, kind of screwing around with that afterwards. Next crisis was 0 Hour, Crisis in Time. This was an interesting one because you see, if you look in the background of the left-hand side, you see what looks like Green Lantern. That is actually Hal Jordan's version of Parallax, an evil entity which had sort of manipulated Jordan. He was from an alternate Earth to become an entity of yellow fear, even though he still wore the Green Lantern costume, and destroy the universe. So what was trying to happen was a villain called Extant, who is also called Monarch, who actually was revealed to be Hawk, a superhero from the mainstream universe. He had gone bad, and he was trying to erase time from either side. So it starts in the wee past, whenever you go and you see people like Commandi or all these guys in the caveman times, and they're being erased and people are jumping forward, and then in the future people are jumping back. So you see Barry Allen's great grandson, or no, just his grandson, Bart Allen, Impulse, which is this little guy right here. He's very annoying, talks a lot, very fast speedster, but he's kind of a jerk. He's immature, is how I should say it. He jumps back in time because of this. So basically, you have an even greater number of heroes now that are in this universe, all because someone was trying to erase time from the other side. So one of the other things that happens is the JSA. These guys, they're made old. Some heroes like the Atom were made into teenagers, and a new character, Damage, came into play. And in order to save the multiverse and save time itself, he had to essentially create a new Big Bang, and he was the Big Bang. So this it wasn't a reboot to the timeline, but it was, I guess, a potential screw up with it. So they jumped over that. The problem was this 0 Hour doesn't really exist anymore. People ignore it. It's eradicated from canon, mainly because it wasn't publicized well. It had over 40 independent tie-ins, and so it was not well received. Oh wait, no, that's converted. My bad. This one did have a lot of tie-ins, not 40, but it was like somewhere over 20, which was almost as many as Crisis, which was, more than Crisis on Infinite Earths. But it was not advertised well, not really received well, and it just did rather poorly. So it's pretty much eradicated. After that, you get to Infinite Crisis. Now, this was the sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths that 0 Hour tried to be. Superman from Earth 2, Alexander Luthor from Earth 3, Superboy Prime, and Lois Lane from Earth 2, Superman 2's wife. They all had escaped in the first Crisis to a paradise. And basically all they were doing was sitting around enjoying each other's company and watching the Earth unfold. So this takes place in 2005. So basically the entire premise of this is, dang, they had to see the 90s unfold. I imagine that anyone just sitting back and watching the 90s unfold would that would drive anyone insane. So Alexander Luthor goes and he attempts to reopen every multiverse that was closed in Crisis on Infinite Earths. He convinces Superman, who is concerned about his wife Lois dying of old age, that they need to reopen Earth 2. Superman, not understanding that he's being manipulated, which is, honestly, it's like, why Superman? You should be able to get this. It's a Luthor. Anyway, he tries to open up the second multiverse, Earth 2, in order to, save his wife, because he thinks that, the good old days, the glory days, the golden age of heroes will revitalize her, which is, I don't know, man. He's just kind of a dumb jock in this one. It's really weird. He goes all, wisdom-y at the very end. But the entire time, he's being manipulated, and at the same time, Superboy Prime, the guy on the right in the big fancy armor, he is also being manipulated by Luthor to go and cause a distraction. So he's basically, he kind of turns evil, gets in a big fight, kills a bunch of heroes. It's pretty bad. Eventually, he's sequestered within a red sun after being taken to the Speed Force, an entity which gives speedsters their power, like Flash, like Kid Flash, Jay Garrick's Flash. He is trapped in there, but somehow escapes. And he escapes with this armor, manages to kill another bunch of heroes again, and has to be fist fought through a red sun and depowered, so that Superman from Earth 2 and Superman from Earth 1 can just fist fight him and beat him senseless while they're all, depowered. The significance there is all of the multiverses were brought back. Alexander Luthor succeeded. So did Superman. He sees Lois Lane go and appear on Earth 2 with him, and he's like, this is going to work. And she's like, no, it's not, you stupid idiot. That's not how science works. People die. They get old. And he has to watch his wife die. He realizes, oh, crap, I championed the wrong Superboy, because Superboy from Earth 1 and Superboy Prime were fighting. That would be these two. Lovely Connor Kent. I can try. Lovely Connor Kent in the black t-shirt, and then Superboy Prime over there. Love Connor Kent to death. Absolutely love him. But so, even though all the multiverses were opened, they were again collapsed, and we were left with New Earth. So with a bunch of heroes dead, 32 Green Lanterns gone, and a semi-new timeline that's been adjusted because, you know, ripples of time have gone out and the multiverse has again been somewhat influenced. We move on to the Final Crisis, which is not the actual Final Crisis. If I can find Final Crisis. There it is. So this was not the actual Final Crisis, even though it was sort of meant to be. Dan Didio, during his time, did a lot of things, and he was constantly pushing for more and more and more crises, you know, life-changing events, which is what all these are. They're moments in time where evolution is moved against by supernatural forces. So what happens in Final Crisis is Darkseid, this big ugly mug over there, he gets access to something called the anti-life equation, which basically it's a superpowered way of saying that loneliness, isolation, and despair lead to a lack of free will. So honestly, I look around STWing and I'm like, he really didn't have to look that far. Most of you bitches are, you know, pretty upset already. But anyway, so he gets access to the anti-life equation, and whenever somebody loses their free will, whoever was using the anti-life equation at the time is now their new master. So he takes over the Earth, and Earth 1 is at the center of the multiverse right now. So that's kind of problematic, you know? If you can take over the new Earth, then you're pretty much taking over the entirety of the multiverse. So Batman has to jump through several realities and timelines as a result of getting, you know, beat to hell by Darkseid. He shoots Darkseid with a special bullet that is meant to kill new gods, but he misses, surprisingly, even though he's relatively close range, actually. I mean, it's not... Anyway. But he gets hit with one of Darkseid's Omega beams and basically has an out-of-body experience through time, which is revisited later on in one of the other crises. So as of now, Superman found a machine that used Element X. It is an infinite possibility element. That is what it is, pure infinite possibility. Similar to Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and their infinite probability vortex or whatever, the infinite drive or something like that. It basically can make anything happen. Element X with this machine can make your thoughts become reality. So anything you're thinking can happen. Superman, as a, quote, pure being, is what he's described, he is able to use this very dangerous machine. I mean, all of a sudden, if it was a normal human, you have a stray thought like, dang, I could really use a hot dog. All of a sudden, infinite worlds just turn into hot dogs, and the population is eaten by a cosmic, you know, carnivore. So Superman, having exceptional willpower and exceptional strength, he is able to use this machine that no other man could use, yada, 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 saves the multiverse, restores balance. And his whole quote is, I got my wish. And Bruce is like, what is it? It's a happy ending. Ta-da, isn't that sweet? Next one, Flashpoint. Now this, funny thing enough, was not meant to be a crisis. This is the 5th crisis amongst them all, but it was by far one of the most influential. Most of these don't actually reboot the entirety of the universe. The only ones that have done that are Crisis on Infinite Earths and Flashpoint. So Flashpoint is very Barry Allen-centric. The past few were mostly Superman, and the last one kind of had a whole Justice League theme. This one is Barry Allen. Barry Allen, Barry Allen, Barry Allen. So the Flash's whole thing is his mom died because a speedster went back in time and killed her in order to make him become the Flash. So the question is, did he become the Flash because he wanted to, or did he become the Flash because of destiny, yada, yada, yada. And that's one of the big overwhelming concepts of his thing. So he goes back in time, saves his mom, stops everything from happening, but he creates a new reality. He doesn't have any powers. Bruce Wayne died in that alley that night, his parents. Thomas Wayne becomes Batman, and Martha Wayne becomes the Joker. Superman wasn't found by the Kents, but instead was locked up in a government facility. And whenever they find him, he is skinny, weak, exceptionally malnourished, and he doesn't know how to control his powers. So as soon as he becomes, you know, outside, and as soon as he goes outside and he gets an encounter with a yellow sun, all of his powers activate at once, and he basically destroys the U.S. military that was sent to, get him back in his little cell. And he's so distraught that he doesn't even know what to do. It's a very, very rough timeline. Barry Allen ends up fixing it. He goes back, merges with himself as he was going through the Speed Force so that he can stop himself and then stop his enemy, Reverse Flash, Eobard Thawne, from screwing up the timeline even more. So that's basically what happened. The significance there, it merges three previously unknown but currently existing timelines. DC, Wildstorm, and Vertigo Comics. Wildstorm and Vertigo were subsidiaries of DC, and now it was basically a major acquisition that allowed them to become part of the main universe as a whole. Most of these crisis events have to relate to the fact that there is acquisitions being made outside of everything. Like in the 70s, Time Warner acquired DC as a whole, and they still, their holding company owns DC for all of its, whatever. That's why Warner Brothers makes all the movies. So that's why they started making sure that there was a concrete timeline at hand. So with the merging of DC, Wildstorm, and Vertigo, you see a new figure come into play called Pandora. Pandora steals, and yes, it's like the box, Pandora steals 10 years of these people's time. So 10 years of DC history is gone. It has changed. Characters that had previously existed don't exist anymore. Marriages were not, they never happened. Children who were born weren't. Random events all of a sudden changed everything. And so you see what is called the New 52. And if I can actually go back to that, we'll go back to the modern age of comics. That was this. You see the Justice League there. Well, look at a rather unfamiliar person. Cyborg didn't start off in the Justice League. This dude started off in the Teen Titans. So why in the very first issue of Justice League is he there? Well, thank the New 52. And thank you, Barry Allen, for messing up the timeline again. You absolute monster. And anyway, so that's basically what happens there. Flashpoint kind of screws with everything. After that comes Convergence. I hate Convergence. It's stupid, and it shouldn't exist. Yeah, that's basically all I got. Basically what happens is there's that's the one where over 40 tie-ins are there. The main storyline wasn't, it was difficult to follow. And what happens is they take all of their video games, movies, TV shows, and they say, all right, we're gonna have a villain come in, snatch characters from everything, not just the comics, not timelines that work together, but alternate realities that don't even exist within the multiverse. And he can take them all and do whatever he wants, and he's gonna have them fight. So it's basically glorified fan service that the fans didn't want. So no, Convergence sucks. And on top of that, because of the way that they had to defeat the big bad guy, the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, is semi-erased. Hal Jordan's Parallax, who was supposed to have died within 0 hour, he, Superman 2, Supergirl, and the Flash have to go back in time and change the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. And the authors, not knowing how to do that, just decided to leave it unsaid. Instead of demonstrating how they went back in time or how they changed events or what's new today because of the way that we changed events, they just don't. And it left a lot of readers really unsatisfied. So yeah, thank you, DC. That was definitely a got 'em moment. It really screwed us over. The last Crisis event is called Dark Knight's Metal. And yes, it is rock and roll as hell. It is a Batman crisis. It is all about Batman. He, over the course of his life, had been exposed to 8 different rare metals. These metals were essentially a beacon that would open up a portal once the 9th metal was touched by him to allow a god named Barbados, yes, Bat being in the name, to come through the earth and destroy it and enslave it and do whatever you wanted with it. So whenever Final Crisis happened and Batman went through his whole jumping through realities thing, that's what attracted Barbados. That's what brought him to the Earth. And so in doing, the Final Crisis, Bruce Wayne essentially screwed everything up, not knowing what he was doing, and allowed this god to come through, bring along several different alternate reality Bruce Waynes, including the Batman Who Laughs, which is a combination of the Batman and the Joker, in a reality where Batman finally does it. He kills the Joker. Turns out the Joker released a poison in his bloodstream, which upon death would release and turn Batman into him. So it's like, what if Batman turned evil? And everyone gets to see that. And it's beautiful. And it's scary because he kills the entirety of the Bat family. and turns on everyone, kills countless realities, Justice Leagues. It's so easy for him to murder everyone because he has all these contingency plans. It's like, this is what happens if Batman goes rogue. He is really the ultimate predator. So after they, fight Barbados out of these special suits of armor, which were made out of that element X, the infinite probabilities or infinite possibilities metal, they fight the god and they save the multiverse. The significance there is that you get unknown consequences. This only happened in 2017, so it was 3 years ago. And as for publishing right now, they're kind of in a sorry state. They're working through stuff. Dan Didio is gone, so the only executive publishers are Jim Lee out of a group of originally 4 people. So Jim is trying to catch up with all that. And that's troublesome. But so you get the Batman Who Laughs, and he screws with the main reality, and then you get something called the Year of the Villain, which is this year, as this year's theme. Year of the Villain is all sorts of villains taking over the main reality. You see Jim Gordon being possessed by an evil entity and getting his own little spin-off series for like a 2-shoot comic. And you see all these people getting screwed up, all because people like the Batman Who Laughs and a new Martian-based Lex Luthor. Yes, he died and he resurrected himself half Martian. They screw with the villains, give them everything they need to defeat their heroes, and now the world's kind of going to hell. And so overall, those are how the crises have happened, and that is how they impact everything. Now, this is the official timeline. This is as good as I can get it without spending another 3 years trying to memorize everything. Basically, what you see here is not a timeline in terms of our years. Yes, I did include the Golden, Silver, Bronze, and Modern Ages just to let you know when things happen and how they occurred. But the real thing you need to look at is the canonized years, the top in green. Those years indicate the actual timeline for events. So Generation 1 was 25 years. That was the Golden Age. However, the Silver and Bronze Age are combined into Generation 2, which takes place over 15 years. The post-crisis, 1986 to about 2011 Flashpoint, that is another 15 years. And then Generation 4, as far as we know, it could be 1 year, it could be about 7 years at maximum. It's still ongoing. That's where we are now, and we're not really sure where things are going to go. So in Gen 1, you see events like, all right, the canon thing is that Superman starts out, Krypton is destroyed, and then Wonder Woman comes, World War II happens, you see Clark Kent become Superboy, Thomas and Martha Wayne die, the JSA forms, the JSA disbands after the Senate bans all superheroes, and Clark Kent stops being Superman for a bit. And on the other side, you see a list of debuted superheroes that were influential to the canon there. Within the Silver and Bronze Ages of Gen 2, you get that 15-year time span. And note, the columns there they're not associated with the Silver or Bronze Ages themselves. The left side is the events. The right side is just going to be more superheroes that debuted. I just put them there for more space, more legibility, because those 2 times are merged into Generation 2. So Batman appears, and he has his whole Year 1 phenomenon. The Joker, Batman's rogues, Catwoman, they all appear. And then comes the emergence of sidekicks. All these heroes are getting, they're getting well in their years, and they need someone to help them out. So Robin, you see Supergirl, you see Aqualad, you see Wonder Girl. They all come in and they help the heroes, and then they form their own little superhero leagues. Teen Titans, The Outsiders, all these sorts of things. During this time span, the first crisis happens. So you see Supergirl, Flash, Aquaman, they all die. And then comes the modern age, which is where most of the crises happen. These were the 7 crises. The only one to happen outside of Generations 3 and 4 was Crisis on Infinite Earths. So in the modern era, you've got Generation 3, which, Death in the Family, Jason Todd, he dies. Killing Joke, Barbara Gordon gets shot. 0 Hour happens, which was the other crisis we talked about. Hal Jordan dies as Parallax in 0 Hour. Damian Wayne is born. Tim Drake comes in as Robin. Harley Quinn appears. Fun fact, Harley Quinn was not a comic character at her inception. She was created for the Batman animated series. She is one of the very few popular characters that have emerged that were not originated in the comics. So, Harley Quinn's a badass, and her origin is even more badass. Any woman that can rise up without having started at the level origin, dope in my book. So you get the final crisis, you get Flashpoint, you get Convergence, and then in Generation 4, and then you get Dark Knight's Metal. That is the official timeline as it stands. Everything, this is the absolute, whatever you want to call it, of Earth 1, New Earth, whatever, however you want to say it. And in these, down here at the bottom, the second to last row is going to be the Crises events, and then their significance to continuity. So you see Crisis on Infinite Earths, started a reboot. 0 Hour just kind of merges some timelines. Infinite Crisis brings back the multiverse and gives you 52. The new 52 is based on that. It was the mainstream 52 worlds that existed. Final Crisis, the anti-life equation comes in. You see Element X. Those are important later on down the line. Flashpoint reboots the series again. New 52, Convergence, screws everything up. Decides that there is a megaverse, which is where multiple multiverses exist, which is stupid. Hate it. Can't emphasize that enough. And then Dark Knight's Metal, so also called the Dark Crisis. So that is ultimately everything. And if I'm incorrect, that was a little bit longer than I intended. But whatever. All right. I am pretty much done. Any questions?
Could we hear more about gay Superman?
Oh, that was fun. There are different types of kryptonite. So, of course, and most people know this. Red kryptonite makes Superman angry. Green kryptonite hurts him. Blue kryptonite will temporarily take away his powers. Silver kryptonite turns him insane. That's only viewed in the Smallville TV series. And then pink kryptonite turns him closeted gay, but ostentatiously kind of gay personality. We'll say it that way. So he comes in and he criticizes Jimmy Olsen's bow tie while complimenting him on his wonderful eyes. This is all back in the 60s, by the way. So, of course, being gay was a joke. Haha, we can do that. It was fun. One of my favorite issues. Subsequently, Batman also got a few new suits. He was wearing a pink suit, a green suit, blue suit, just to compliment Superman. Interesting time.
Want to hear about gay heroes? Then I think the first gay couple actually originated in Vertigo, which is now in DC. It was the Midnighter and Apollo, I think. So Apollo was Vertigo's version of Superman, if I oversimplify it, and Midnighter is kind of Vertigo's version of Batman, again oversimplified, because Midnighter is actually a badass. He has this computer in his brain that simulates every fight before it happens, so he can act on every specific move. So there's one point.
Is as cool as Midnighter.
What?
Oh, I think I've read a couple with him.
Yeah, I think there's one point where he beats 5 Kryptonians, and he's like, "Your teamwork is excellent. There were only 5 different versions of the simulation where I won," or something. It's insane. But they're the first gay couple, and it's amazing.
Yeah, DC has a I don't want to say a strong history of LGBT rights. I mean, I don't think there's really anybody out there that really has that. But in terms of comic lore, they kind of started off on a medium ground. It's they don't immediately bury all their gays, so I appreciate that much. But they could be doing better. It's Vertigo was a good way for them to please the community while not making things mainstream canon and upsetting, the casual viewer. But, now we've got to the point where the first Green Lantern, Alan Scott, is openly gay. You've got numerous characters of various sexualities, including, pansexual characters. Marvel's always done a little bit better with that. Deadpool himself is a pansexual. You've got the Canadian Alpha Flight team, which debuted with its first homosexual couple. Wiccan and Hulkling were a gay couple from the new Avengers. They do better. So DC has something to catch up with there.
I mean, DC did it before, though, if that makes sense.
They, but it wasn't. They didn't do it in their main continuity is the problem.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So Vertigo did it, but DC did it. DC was like, you're the redheaded stepchild. We can push you away and make you the gay one.
Also, Deadpool and Spider-Man's relationship is honestly one of the greatest things comics has brought the world. It's beautiful.
Is that actually canon? I always kind of thought that was just a meme.
No, Deadpool.
I've read
Deadpool is-
nothing Marvel, so
It's not like Deadpool will regularly hint at the fact that he wants to, do everything with Spider-Man. And Spider-Man is just like, you know that I'm straight and I'm married, right? Timeline it is. It's a very cute relationship. Any other questions? Any other
I
questions?
have a question.
Shoot.
So, like, man, this whole both multiverse and time traveling's got me fucked up. Do you think that there's like a credence to like compartmentalizing storylines? Like, I feel like this is super unpalatable to like the new consumer that just wants like a Batman that's just like a dude and he doesn't like exist in this complex string of events and histories and multi-histories and time travel, and they just want to like a character storyline.
That is actually something I wasn't going to hit on this too much, but that is kind of where DC Comics is looking to go. The consolidation of all their timelines was in an effort to please the consumer. That's why they stopped printing issues of multiverse theories. That's why they stopped doing their Golden Age stories. With Crisis on Infinite Earths, it was supposed to consolidate everything into one universe, one world, no, time travel, of course, one thing, but no universe hopping, no alternate realities. And then, of course, they screwed it up because, fanboys are fanboys. The whole point, though, of the new generation, it's called 5G, and we don't know too much about it, especially after Dan Didio, one of the main publishers, left. It was basically his baby, but it looks like it's still at play. It is a solid, concrete canonization of events. It will include an actual timeline with specific dates as things happen, and it will introduce new characters for consumers to enjoy and for them to just kind of be straightforward in their adventures. The good thing about the Golden Age was, it was just individual capers and there wasn't too much to worry yourself about. The problem was not, good story writing all the time. So what 5G is going to try to do is they're going to try to kind of give it a restart. Bruce Wayne won't be Batman anymore. It'll be Lucius Fox's son, who will be black. So you'll see a black Superman. Superman may step down from the mantle. Wonder Woman will also step down. A good number of the Justice Leaguers will, and you will see continuity changes that are in effect for the next 20 to 30, if not more years. So that's what they're trying to do. The problem is they don't do it well.
Also, I think it's a question of the medium. Like, comics aren't. Comics. This is obviously a hasty generalization, but comics aren't necessarily the primary medium for a random consumer to gain access to superheroes anymore. Now it's like movies and TV
movies and television series,
yeah, and like
that's
stuff
why
like
I think DC Universe, the app and its formatting was really good because it gave everyone consolidated reading lists, an organization as to how the universe operates. So for the dedicated comic fan who will put in maybe a month of time, you could organize your entire history and understand everything basically that you really wanted to know without going too deep. And it gave you access to all their movies, all their such. And, that was good. Personally, I'm really a big fan of DC's animated stories. They take big storylines and they simplify them, but they give it, the problem with comics is it's a still motion picture or whatever. So it's nice to see the superheroes actually fight versus seeing the panels happen. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think Justice League Unlimited, the Justice League cartoons were like brilliant, and Young Justice too. Yeah, those two are my favorites.
I have a question. I don't know if it's outside of the scope of the presentation, but why are the DC movies so much worse than the Marvel movies?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. I'm glad you asked that. The point of DC movies is catch up. They are trying to catch up to Marvel.
Oh.
Marvel started off years ago with a consolidated universe. Back in the 70s and the 80s, there was already a Captain America, an Iron Man, a Thor, and a Hulk. And they even brought in a little bit of the Fantastic Four to it. Stan Lee's first cameo was in Trial of the Incredible Hulk, which was like 1980-something. Like the early 80s, and that was as a result of settlement. But so Marvel has always kind of had the game when it comes to movies until it came to Tim Burton's Batman series. Everyone liked that. and they thought it was cool, so they stuck with the concept of trilogies. DC wanted to make trilogies. They wanted to make, these anthological stories that someone could follow. Marvel jumped the gun. Kevin Feige said, hey, I want to make an integrated universe. Comics operate like that. So why don't movies operate like that? Why don't your heroes cross over with each other? So he started that in like 2005, whenever Batman Begins hadn't even come out yet. It was coming out in 2006. And then by 2008, you saw Iron Man. And that opened up the world. So DC, ever since Iron Man, has been trying to play catch up. They had, Man of Steel in like 2011, 2012. And then they didn't release another movie for a while just because they were trying to catch up with it.
I also think it's like related to how the heroes are like created in the first place. Like, I think when Captain America and Iron Man were made, they were made with the extended universe in mind, including the Fantastic Four. Like, all of them existed in New York, and like
partially.
Also, none of the original Avengers were big enough names to overshadow the group. Before the Marvel Universe came out, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor weren't really big characters. The Hulk was, but the rest of them were like minor-ish B-list characters because they sold all their A-list characters. So
Iron Man was actually a big comic for women. Housewives were big fans of Iron Man for some reason. And then the bigger name characters for Marvel were characters like X-Men, the Fantastic
Spider-Man.
Four, which is why I had difficult times acquiring those rights back. They sold them years ago to get themselves out of debt to save the company. And then now that they've got the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they were trying to bring everyone back home was the concept. And that's why it took years to get Spider-Man back, underneath them, which I'm still not exactly too thrilled about, not going to lie. But yeah, Marvel started off a little well. They had a good line of characters which could be put together in a decent way that it wouldn't be like, oh, here's one standout hero that is above the rest. DC, the big thing was Stan Lee, honestly. Stan took everything and DC tried to copy their comics for a long time, and they sent in analysts to try and figure out why Marvel was outselling them back in the late 60s and early 70s. And they noted things like, oh, well, the color red is often used in the comic covers, so we should try to mimic that. So comic covers started becoming more red. So Stan Lee, upon finding out that these were what DC was basing their productions on and their publications on and basing their, this is what's going to put us in the black. He started changing it up. So just, screwing with their expectations, because what they really weren't seeing was his organization behind the scenes, his masterful writing. Kevin Feige took a note from Stan Lee's book and put everything in an organized universe. It was kind of how it went.
yeah, I think the one good DC movie was Wonder Woman, I think, which was like a standalone story, because I think that's what DC does best. And Shazam was pretty good too. Like standalone, their heroes work better standalone, I just think, because they're all just their own people.
I think we can all hold a special place in our heart for Shazam, being a Philadelphia boy.
Yeah.
Also, I think that I know very little about comics, but my general impression is that the characters of DC are a lot more one-dimensional and less interesting than the Marvel characters, in that Superman's just like Superman, my dude. He's Superman.
Contradiction. DC is actually one of the publishers that put in the concept of making your heroes not heroes anymore. Frank Miller's Dark Knight franchise took Batman from being, the standard detective, which he was in the 60s and 70s, and turned him into a gruesome anti-hero, very much hell-bent on violence and struggling with issues of morality within himself, saying, is it all right to beat up people? Am I loving it for the fact that I'm engaging and letting loose, or am I loving it for the fact that I'm making a difference in the world? Marvel in the 60s had a good idea, which was, open up the world to teenagers with Spider-Man, and that made them more relatable. But the big characters were very one-dimensional in their aspects until about the 70s. That's whenever you saw people facing problems like Tony Stark's drinking problem. But
Yeah,
DC had been
wonderful.
on top of the game before that. You saw Roy Harper dealing with drug addiction before Tony Stark ever was, an alcoholic. They were very much, I'm gonna say they were socially conscious. Although Stan was as well. Within the bullpen, he was always championing it. X-Men is a very good indication of his social awareness. It was, you take people who are different and throw them in society. It was a metaphor for race and gender identity, the struggle there. But DC I think has always been very good in the way they approach their character. That's just a personal opinion.
Also, if you take like individual storylines that like are considered artistically like some of the best comics ever, almost all of them fall in DC. If you look at The Dark Knight Returns, Killing Joke, Watchmen was like one of the most like intricate socio-political commentaries at the time, and that was
And
DC.
that
Well, not
the
kind of DC.
Vertigo subsidiary. So
Vertigo.
if they can produce something this good out of not even their mainstream publisher, that speaks highly to them.
I think the movies made the characters seem pretty one-dimensional because they didn't take the time to build them up the way that the MCU did, right? For Iron Man, for Thor, you had like multiple movies introducing these characters, and even though not all of those movies were good, Iron Man 2, Thor Dark World,
Iron Man 3 was worse.
Iron Man 2 was great. All right.
You have like multiple movies to get to know these people, right? There's multiple Avengers movies, and everyone has their own individual movies before they're brought in as part of the team for the most part, except for Hawkeye and Black Widow. But they did appear in other movies. For example, like Black Widow was in Iron Man 2. But Marvel really took the time to build out their characters before putting them all together, and DC didn't do that, right? We didn't have a solo Batman movie, and he's like the focus of Batman v Superman. That's why it felt so weird, because we'd like kind of seen Superman, but Batman was completely new. Wonder Woman had her own movie, but the Flash didn't have his own movie. Cyborg didn't have his own movie, and so in that movie you had to give
After
Baby S,
Batman.
yeah.
She jumped in too.
Yeah, and so you basically had these characters who you'd never seen before, so they had to like give the characters introductions as part of the movie. And so you didn't get as much of the actual movie's plotline. You didn't get as much of the characters individually because you had to balance your movie time between all of the characters. And so it just ended up not being good because, these characters in the comics are great, but they're not telling you all the great stuff because they didn't leave themselves enough time. Like Jesse said, they're trying to play catch up too quickly. Whereas if they took their time and like built out the movies, this is why I'm excited to see when the actual like solo Batman movie comes out. Like I really hope they do a good job and they take their time with it, because I would love to see a great Batman movie.
That is a problem series right now, because it looks like it's just going to be another independent trilogy. Yeah, they're talking, just going back to what they're good at, roots, going for the anthologies. You had characters. You had actors like Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill and Gal Gadot playing characters like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. And it's like, these are beautiful actors, but you've misused them, and now they're like walking away from it, save for Gal. It's like, what do you do? You had your A team, and you failed. So they're looking at making it an independent thing. Although talks are in to make Batman and Catwoman married within the sequel. They're already talking about that. That would follow in with the most recent Tom King Batman series, which featured.
I was gonna say that's canon.
Selena Kyle was supposed to marry Batman. She walked away at the altar, and they actually ended up getting married. Batman number 85. They got married unofficially. There was no judge there. There was a priest, and they're like, "Look, we're outlaws. We're vigilantes. Do we really give a shit about the law?" So you see them like laying in bed together, talking about, it's good. It's just you and us, you and me, Bat and the Cat. So I'd be interested to see that play out on the big screen.
Yeah,
I'll be honest, Catwoman is not my favorite love interest of Batman, but that's a very personal opinion.
He has so many. It's like you can really pick and choose which ones you like, which ones are better for him, because they did sort of flesh out a lot of those relationships better than a lot of other ones they've done. It's not just, oh, this is dangerous woman. Batman is attractive.
Danger Woman
With
TM.
Daredevil though, with Daredevil, it's like the moment Daredevil is in a relationship with someone, you know that chick's dead or something terrible.
Daredevil's
Instantly.
girlfriend will always die.
Always Elektra. Black Widow
my
got
God.
some shit happened to Black Widow, and then there was that one lady who also died.
That one lady
Very
who
gruesome
also.
way. She was played by a blonde in the TV show. That's all I know. I don't remember her name.
That other
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, and then she like Kingpin got her hooked to drugs, and then like she was like, yeah, no, some really bad stuff happened there.
That wasn't Karen, was it?
Oh, that was canon. No, that was canon.
No, I mean that was her name, Karen. Was
Karen.
that Karen?
Yeah, her
Yeah.
name's Karen. Yeah,
Grimlock.
Yeah.
pretty grim. Yeah. No, Daredevil comics are always like so. I mean, I love Daredevil because of that.
Fun fact: Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a parody of Daredevil. Teenage Mutant Ninja right, Daredevil was trained by a guy named Stick. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were trained by a guy named Splinter. Daredevil fights the hand. TMNT fights the foot. It's yeah, weird.
Hey, I gotta go to
Alright.
dinner, but thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, see you, Keenan.
I'm glad
See you.
to see you guys. Thank you for this time. I'm personally gonna go as well.
Okay.
But